The Umbrella Revolution, protesters demanding democracy, shut down Hong Kong.
Hong Kong will have no future. That's why we are here.
This is SBS World News with Anton Enos and Janice Peterson.
Good evening. Parts of Hong Kong remain at a standstill as thousands of pro-democracy protesters refuse to heed government calls to leave the streets. Schools, banks and many offices closed as a blockade of major thoroughfares continues.
The government has ordered riot police to withdraw, hoping that might encourage protesters to disperse and bring an end to what's being called the Umbrella Revolution.
Democracy protests in Hong Kong are a common occurrence, but not like this. Police had warned protesters outside the government complex in central Hong Kong to disperse or they would take action, which they did.
The Hong Kong SAR government is resolute in opposing the unlawful occupation actions by Occupy Central. The police shall continue to handle the situation in accordance with the law.
But the protesters say those laws are made to serve Beijing, not the people of Hong Kong.
We won't go home. We won't. Not only me, all of us here won't go home until we have victory at last.
As news spread that tear gas had been used, rather than dissuade the crowds, it had the opposite effect, as thousands more poured onto the streets in solidarity.
The scale of today's occupation is beyond our expectations, and it's purely initiated by people themselves. It is not our operations. So people are really determined to fight for democracy and their own dignities.
What began as a student-led protest movement came about as China had promised Hong Kong a popular vote to elect its next regional leader in 2017. However, last month Beijing announced it, and not the people of Hong Kong, would choose the candidates.
If we miss this chance to fight for ourselves, I think Hong Kong will have no future. That's why we are here.
As morning broke, many remained, and they've made it clear they have no plans to leave. The withdrawal of riot police has helped calm tensions, but Wednesday is China's National Day, and protest organisers have promised even bigger crowds will return then. Marcus Rubenstein, SBS World News.
And a short time ago, CNN's Andrew Stevens in Hong Kong filed this report for SBS.
If the aim of this protest was to occupy parts of Hong Kong, protesters are certainly achieving that. Behind me is a 10-lane highway, the main arterial route going into central Hong Kong, the heart of the financial district. And as you can see, it is completely thronged with protesters who are trying to get the Hong Kong government and Beijing to change their minds on how the choice for the next candidate for the leadership of Hong Kong is going to be made. This movement, this Occupy movement, says they want full universal suffrage. They want to choose their own candidates and vote for their own candidates. They say that Beijing wants to choose the candidates for them, and this is the heart of this protest. But certainly throughout today, the numbers have been swelling and swelling significantly, and it has also been peaceful. The chants are of peace. The chants that we hear are for the current leadership to step down. The police say the situation has become calm to the point that they can stand down their own riot police. This is a far cry, though, from about 12 hours ago when Hong Kong riot police were using tear gas and using pepper spray to try to bring protesters under control around the central government offices. And people I've been speaking to say that the use of that gas, the use of that pepper spray has been a catalyst to getting more and more people out onto the streets of Hong Kong today to show their solidarity with what's going on. And certainly the mood here has been peaceful in downtown Hong Kong. They have been on a campaign of civil disobedience with the idea of trying to close down the lifeline, down the financial heart. At this stage, though, they certainly have not achieved that. The Hong Kong exchange, stock exchange, is still open, as is most businesses. But they are certainly sending a very, very clear message to Hong Kong with the sheer number of people on the streets in the territory today.
That's Andrew Stevens. And protesters in Taiwan clashed with police as they rallied in support of Hong Kong's democracy movement. They were outside the Hong Kong Trade Office in Taipei when a representative came out to speak. He was shouted down. Scuffles broke out as students tried to storm the offices. The protesters say they will return if there are more crackdowns on dissent in Hong Kong. About 75,000 Hong Kong-born people live in Australia. Many are students. Several hundred of them rallied in Sydney today, urging the Australian government to speak up for democratic rights.
Most of these students are novices in activism, but such is their shock at events in Hong Kong that studies today were put on hold, standing in solidarity with fellow protesters back home.
I cannot use words to describe how much disappointment and anger.
It's really heartbreaking.
I never think about it's going to happen in Hong Kong.
Many here are too young to remember the uncertainty caused by the handover, but recognise this is now a new turning point.
I think this will be wake up many Hong Kong people.
They're calling on Australia to flex some diplomatic muscle.
You are a player in that international stage. You should voice out when you see something is wrong.
Use this opportunity to demonstrate its international obligation and moral guts to give them the support.
Some older migrants are haunted by memories of the Tiananmen Square crackdown.
I am very, yes. And I am feeling helpless at the moment.
Anxiety quickly turning to tears.
25 years after, I can see almost similar things happen in Hong Kong, and that's my place, my hometown.
A petition gathered hundreds of signatures before being marched to nearby Hong Kong House.
Organisers had hoped a representative of the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office would come down to receive their petition, but so far that hasn't happened.
The entrance guarded by the Australian Federal Police, protesters instead posted messages for the public to see. Eventually a representative appeared, assuring authorities in Hong Kong would read the views of residents far from home. Marion Ives, SBS World News.
Recapping our top stories now, parts of Hong Kong remain at a standstill as thousands of pro-democracy protesters refuse to leave the streets. The government has ordered riot police to withdraw, hoping that might end what's being called the Umbrella Revolution.